Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to dive into something really special today? We're taking a close look at Beethoven.
But not just the Beethoven you hear about in music history class.
Exactly, we're going deeper. We found this fictionalized account.
And it's fascinating. It uses a really interesting approach to help us understand Beethoven's relationship with music, especially as his hearing changed over time.
And we've got excerpts from it we're excited to share. I think it brings a whole other dimension to his story. It really makes you think about what it might have been like to be Beethoven, experiencing music and sound in such a unique way as his life went on.
It goes way beyond the typical biographical stuff, birth dates, famous works. It gets at something deeper.
Exactly. And there's this one element in the story, this wooden figure named Manny.
Ah, Manny. He's key. You'll see.
He becomes this really interesting symbol throughout Beethoven's life.
You almost wouldn't expect it. This simple wooden figure, but he pops up at these crucial moments in the story.
Right. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start at the beginning.
Back to young Ludwig.
Yes. A young boy just trying to navigate his father's really demanding expectations when it came to music.
The story paints such a vivid picture of him, full of passion, but also feeling the weight of what his father wanted from him musically. It's in one of these moments, when young Ludwig is really struggling, that his mother introduces him to Manny.
It's like she recognizes Ludwig needs something more than just practice, practice, practice.
Structure, discipline.
Right. So she gives him this wooden figure, Manny, and tells him Manny might help him more than he realizes.
And that night,
What happens?
Ludwig has this dream, this incredibly vivid dream.
What happens in the dream?
He finds himself in this world where music isn't just something you hear, but something you feel all around you, almost like a physical presence.
Wow.
I know, right? And guess who comes to life in this dream?
Manny.
Manny, guiding young Ludwig through this amazing landscape of sound.
It's such a creative way to tell his story.
Right. It lets the story get at something more than just historical facts, It hints at this deeper, more intuitive way of understanding and experiencing music.
Absolutely. And in this dream, this is important. We encounter this idea of breathing with the music for the first time.
Yeah. There are moments when Ludwig's breath syncs up with the rhythm, like it becomes part of the music.
Take a deep breath with us now, listeners. Feel that for a moment. It's like the story is inviting us to connect with that feeling too.
To experience music in a more physical, almost visceral way.
It's almost meditative, finding that stillness and letting the music wash over you.
This connection between breath and music, it's something to keep in mind as we go, because it becomes even more significant as Ludwig grows older and his relationship with sound changes.
This is where the story takes such a fascinating turn. Young Ludwig, so full of life and promise, faces this incredible challenge.
It's a far cry from those carefree days of childhood. But before we get to that, I think it's important to pause for a moment. Appreciate how that early connection with Manny and that dream world foreshadow what's to come for Beethoven.
It's like the story setting the stage. It's helping us to understand how Beethoven's perception of music would evolve as his hearing began to change.
It really makes you think about how we experience music, It's not just about our ears, it's our whole body, our emotions, our memories.
So true. And the story captures that beautifully. So we've got young Ludwig making a name for himself, his talent shining through, and then everything changes.
The train station incident.
It's almost like the story hinges on that moment. What happens?
It's described as this really jarring, disorienting experience, like a train whistle, but magnified 100 times louder than it should be. Overwhelming. And for Ludwig, it's the beginning of his hearing loss.
Oh, wow.
The story doesn't sugarcoat it. It really conveys the fear, the despair he must have been feeling as his world started to change.
Yeah. Can you imagine? A world that's slowly going quiet? The sounds you used to depend on becoming muffled, distorted.
It's heartbreaking, and this is where the whole idea of breath comes back into play. Remember how in Ludwig's childhood dream, his breath was connected to the joy of music? That feeling of being swept up in the rhythm?
Right, this natural, effortless expression.
Exactly. But as his hearing deteriorates, breath takes on this whole other meaning. It becomes associated with struggle, with trying to grasp onto a world that's slipping away.
Oh, I see. So instead of flowing with the music, he's almost fighting against the silence.
There's this one scene, it's so powerful. Ludwig is at the piano and he can feel the music inside him. But the sounds coming from the instrument, they're garbled, unclear. The disconnect is agonizing.
He's trying to bridge the gap between what he feels and what he hears, but he can't quite get there.
And it's in that moment of complete frustration that he reaches for Manny.
That little wooden figure.
Yeah.
The one constant in his life, right? Through all the turmoil, all the change, it's like Manny represents something solid, something unchanging, a source of comfort in this chaotic internal world he's navigating.
I can see why the author made that choice. It's such a powerful image. So what happens next? Does Ludwig find solace in Manny?
He does. And it happens in another dream, but this one This dream is different. It's not the whimsical, magical soundscape from his childhood.
What's it like?
This one is intense. It's like this story is mirroring the inner turmoil Ludwig is going through. He finds himself on stage about to conduct an entire orchestra.
Oh.
And just as he's about to begin, silence. Deafening silence. He can see the musicians, their movements, but the sound doesn't reach him.
The ultimate nightmare for a musician.
Right. And in that moment, as the panic starts to take over, Manny appears.
Of course he does. He always seems to appear when Ludwig needs him most.
Exactly. But this time, he's holding something. A simple balloon.
A balloon. Okay, I'm not sure I follow. Seems so ordinary. Especially given the gravity of the situation. Think about it for a second. What's a balloon filled with?
Yeah.
And what is breath?
It's how we experience sound. We need breath to create music, to make those vibrations. I get it. The balloon, it's a physical representation of breath, of sound itself.
Precisely. And as Ludwig takes the balloon from Manny, you know what he does. He starts to inflate it.
He's breathing life into it.
And in a way, he's breathing life back into himself. He's finding a new way to connect with vibration, to feel the pulse of the music, even without being able to hear it clearly. It's a brilliant metaphor, wouldn't you say?
It's like he's discovering this whole new dimension of music, this way of experiencing it that goes beyond just sound waves hitting your eardrums.
It's about finding meaning and beauty, even in the absence of what you once considered essential.
It's like he's going beyond the limitations of his physical body, finding a way to tap into the essence of music itself.
And we as listeners were right there with him, experiencing that transformation.
This is where this story really gets to me. This is where it goes beyond music history and becomes something much bigger.
So the story takes us to this pivotal moment, not just in Beethoven's life, but in musical history.
The premiere of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Exactly. And imagine this. Beethoven standing on that conductor's podium, facing a packed concert hall.
Knowing he can't hear a single note of the masterpiece he's created.
It's hard to even fathom, isn't it? To pour your heart and soul into something knowing you may never experience it in the same way as others.
Right, like a painter who's lost their sight or a chef who can no longer taste.
Exactly. But this is Beethoven. He's not one to be defined by limitations.
So what happens? How does the story handle this moment? Does the audience know he can't hear?
Some do, but the story focuses on something else, something more universal.
Okay.
It's about that collective experience of music, how it can transcend our individual differences, our limitations.
I like that. So it's not about Beethoven's deafness. It's about the music itself and how it connects us.
Precisely. And there's this powerful moment the story describes. As the symphony builds to its climax, Beethoven places his hand on his chest.
What is he doing? Is he feeling his heartbeat?
He's feeling the vibrations of the music through the floor, through his own body. And get this, as he does this, the audience in the story, they seem to breathe with him.
Wow. Like a collective inhale and exhale.
Right. It's a moment of shared humanity, a recognition that even in silence, there's this profound connection.
And Beethoven, even though he can't hear the music in the traditional sense, he's still leading the audience on this incredible journey.
He's become a conduit, channeling the music not just through the musicians, but through himself, through the very air in the concert hall.
It gives me chills just thinking about it. So how does it end? What happens after the final note fades away?
The story doesn't end with thunderous applause or critical acclaim. It goes back to Beethoven at home, alone with his thoughts. And of course, Manny is by his side.
That little wooden figure. He's been there through it all, hasn't he?
Yeah.
From the demanding expectations of Beethoven's father to the joy of early success and through the devastating loss of hearing.
He is a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of incredible challenges, even when the world seems determined to silence us, there's still beauty to be found.
Music to be made.
Exactly. And, it makes you think, where do we find that resilience in our own lives? What helps us to keep going when things get tough?
That's a great question for our listeners to ponder. What helps you find your rhythm, your breath, when you're facing challenges? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspectives.
We always say that the best deep dives spark more questions than answers.
And this one definitely fits the bill. We've explored not just the life of a musical genius, but the very nature of sound, silence, and the human spirit.
And we've just scratched the surface. There's always more to discover.
Absolutely. Well, that was incredible. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly inspired right now.
Me too. It really makes you appreciate the power of music, doesn't it?
It's a universal language, one that speaks to us on a level beyond words. And that's what this deep dive has really driven home for me.
Beautifully said.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. But the conversation doesn't end here. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode.
What resonated with you? What surprised you? Head over to the comments section and share your takeaways.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your fellow deep divers. Until next time, keep exploring the symphony of life.